Venice
versus South Venice.
We're going to tell you everything you need to know about the differences between the two areas.
And we're getting started right now.
If you're looking to move to the Venice or South Venice area,
make sure to call, text, or email me. I am a local realtor here. My information will be in the description box below.
So the main difference, I would say, like the broad level between the two, is South Venice doesn't really have an HOA. Most of the rest of Venice will have an HOA, and because of that, there's going to be some very clear differences in obviously HOA fees, but also the types of yard and house and all of that. So maybe take us away and tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so in South Venice, you're going to find a little bit older homes, maybe a little bit smaller, although there has been a lot of new construction throughout the years, so there are some bigger, nicer homes. But for the most part, I would say they are a little bit older and on the smaller side, while Venice, on the other hand, they have a little bit bigger homes, more updated, and also a lot of condos. So there is a little more variety of different kinds of homes and different lifestyles that you might want to live.
And one thing I want to make sure we make clear before we go too much further, because we get this question in the comments quite a bit, is when we say Venice, a lot of people want to know, do we mean just the island? Because a lot of people think of Venice and just the island. With this, we're kind of including Venice Island and then also a lot of the gated communities. South Venice, the designated area, is kind of its own thing. So we're kind of comparing just South Venice to everything else in Venice here. That being said, Venice Island is going to cost even more than most gated communities just because you're closer to the water, you're closer to the downtown, all that kind of stuff. South Venice is usually going to be like your cheapest option as far as the cost of a home. Because the homes are a little older, there is no HOA fees. All those things combined are things to consider. And one other thing I want to mention before we get too much further, if you want to get really in depth into any of this stuff, we have three videos that we'll link down below. One on Venice, Florida in general, some of our favorite things about it. One on South Venice specifically, we go really in depth on it there. And then one on the 5 main different ways to live in Venice. That'll kind of give you an idea of some of your options. So I just want to throw that out there. We've got so much on this channel to help you out that just this video will give you a broad bird's eye view.
So in South Venice, the cost of a home will be a little bit lower than the city of Venice or Venice Island, just because, again, you're not an HOA. Homes are typically smaller and they are a little bit older, maybe a little bit outdated. So the homes are going to be a lot less expensive, even given the market. And then in Venice, the city of Venice and all the planned communities, homes are typically newer. So you are going to have newer, maybe a little bit bigger home. And also another thing that we should probably mention is that the city of Venice, the Venice Island, there is no HOA, but if you're obviously like in a condo or a villa,
manufactured home community.
Or a manufactured home, yes, you are going to have an HOA fee. Sometimes there are condo fees for condos plus HOA fees, so that's another thing that you should keep in mind.
One other thing that I think is a really important main difference between the two to keep in mind is that with South Venice, since there is no HOA, generally on Venice Island, I think most of the places are pretty well maintained, well kept. Everything kind of looks nice, it's pretty consistent. Gated community, HOA community, it has to be that way because the HOA will come for you if it isn't. In South Venice, there's going to be a little bit more of a mixed bag as far as one house looks this way, next house looks this way. This house might not be taken care of as good. For the most part, I'd say most of them are pretty well taken care of, but there's going to be a little bit more of that mix, and because of that, your property value could change depending on what the yards around look like, things like that.
Yes, and South Venice is so much different too. A lot of people, when they come to Venice, they go to the island and they're like, oh my gosh, I want to move here, I want to live here. But realistically, prices on the island are so much more that for most people, they won't be on the island unless you have a budget of $800,000 and upwards for a small home, or if you want to be on a condo, then that's very doable. But for most people, they find that they can't be on the island, so they'll have to be somewhere else in Venice. And when they visit like South Venice, they're like, oh my gosh, like I can't move here. This is like so bad. And again, it's because of that culture shock.
And I think one difference that stands out to a lot of people when they first see South Venice is the power lines.
Yes.
There's the power lines a lot in the front yards. So like I grew up in the country, we had power lines, and to me it's like, who cares, there's power lines. But to some people it's just like, well, this is a rough neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I think it just kind of depends on where you come from, but it's definitely not a rough neighborhood. The crime rate is a little higher than I'd say like Venice Island, but it's not like bad by any.
Yeah, I think the way I put it is anywhere in Venice that you move to, you're going to be pretty safe. I mean, things do happen like everywhere else, but it's not, the crime rate, it's not bad. I've never felt unsafe here. It's not a big city, so, and the population is a lot older, so how many older adults do you know that will be going out there and committing crimes?
Yeah.
Like,
one other thing I think that's a really important distinction between the two that everyone should be aware of is well and septic versus city water and sewer. Most of South Venice, I think pretty much all of South Venice, you're going to have well and septic, and with that well water, we have heard a lot of people saying appliances don't last as long that use the water, like a dishwasher. The water can, if you're running a sprinkler, stay in your house because of all the rust or whatever else is all in there. I'm not really sure. I'm not a water expert, but I do know those issues are a thing. We've heard that from a lot of people.
and for a lot of people too, like we're just not familiar about well water and septic. So for a lot of people, it's like, oh my gosh, this is almost like a third world country. Like, how do you not have city water and sewer? But it is very common here in Florida, the whole state. You'll have a mixed bag pretty much. If you're like in a bigger city, you do have city water and sewer, but if you're like out like in the country, would be for us, you don't. So it's just something to keep in mind as well.
And a couple other things to point out with that water is, number one, you're not going to have a water bill, so that's good, but you will have to pay a certain amount of money to maintain the septic tank. And one other thing a lot of people choose to do that could really help that water situation, if you feel like the quality of the water is not up to par or not what you're looking for, obviously a water softener, but a lot of people get a whole house reverse osmosis system, and that'll really help with the quality of your water.
So both South Venice and Venice have, I wouldn't say a lot of shopping, but there is enough. There is a few different department stores, grocery stores, so it's not very difficult to get to where you're going. It might be a little more difficult from the island. So you have 3 different bridges, and if at one point one of those bridges is up, like it can take you forever to get to your destination. But from South Venice, you can easily get to different shopping centers and with stores like Marshall's, Burlington, Bell's, Home Centric,
Publix, Walmart, Target.
Yes,
and we got plenty of everything you need. We have
Yes.
just some of the more want type stores we might not have.
Yes, and with that, you can just take a short drive to Sarasota or Fort Myers. Sarasota is about 30 to 40 minute drive, depending on traffic, and Fort Myers about an hour and 20 maybe.
Yeah, something like that.
Depending on traffic again, and also Port Charlotte, which Port Charlotte would be closer to South Venice.
Yeah, and that's probably about a 40-minute drive.
Yes.
So, but they do have a mall in Port Charlotte too. And also beaches, that's obviously an important thing. If you're gonna move to Venice, I think a lot of people that draw is the beaches. So South Venice and a lot of the planned communities that are off the island, it just depends on where you're located, north, south. But if you're further south, it might be the quickest to get to Manasota Key Beach, which is, I think, technically an Inglewood beach, but it's in Sarasota County, so there is still free parking. Great beach, a little bit quieter, might get busier if they do put that road from Welland Park through to it, but at the time, pretty quiet beach, great beach. We love going there. If you're a little bit more north or on Venice Island, then you're probably looking at the other main beaches of Venice, which would be like South Brohard, Paw Park, which is the dog park, the main Venice beach. You've got Casperson, and then like Sharky's by the pier, that whole beach area. I think it's technically Brohard, but everyone just calls it Sharky's. So that's the main beaches as far as that goes. But even if you live in South Venice and you want to get all the way to the northernmost beach, which would be like by the jetty and Venice Beach, you're looking at maybe a 15-minute drive max to get there. 20 if there's a lot of traffic. It's really not that bad, and almost anywhere you live, you're probably within 5-10 minute drive of the beach, unless you're really far east.
Yes. Yeah, and I mean, it just depends what kind of lifestyle you're looking for when moving to Venice. Do you want that, like cookie cutter neighborhood that every other house looks the same and you have sidewalks and maybe your lawn looks kept and better? Or do you want to be more on the relaxed side of things and not even worry about what your neighbor's house looks like or what their lawn looks like? So it's more of a personal preference as far as what you want out of your neighborhood.
And one thing to add to that is, maybe you don't want to be like, okay, I don't want to live on the island or I can't afford to live on the island, it's just too expensive. With the island, you do get a little less of that cookie cutter because there are different houses, but they're all very nice. But for some people, it's just not in the budget, right? Then you got the planned communities, and you might look at that as, okay, they're going to be all looking very similar, very cookie cutter and maybe higher HOA costs. Then you got South Venice. You may or may not like that there's less restrictions, that the houses are going to be more different from one to the next. It is more affordable. So those are some things to consider. But I think there's also some kind of middle ground to consider as well. There are some lower priced HOAs like Chestnut Creek, Ventura Village, that the houses... Rapallo.
Venice Gardens.
And Venice Gardens is the other one I was going to mention. I almost look at Venice Gardens a little separately because it's a little more like South Venice, but it's a little bit more upkept, a little bit higher HOA. By the way, we didn't mention South Venice. There's an optional low price HOA, which gets you access to a private beach ferry that it's like a pass basically for the year that you pay, and this ferry takes you to your own private beach. So that's kind of a cool perk if you choose to pay that. But yeah, I mean, there's some of these lower priced HOA communities that aren't super restrictive either, in more of like these planned communities. And you also have again, I almost think of Venice Gardens as being kind of separate from most planned communities.
People look at it as its own little town, and it is actually, like, if you pull it up on the map, it'll say population of like 7,000 people. But Venice Gardens is just like basically off of the island, and like that's like the first neighborhood you'll see when you come off the island on the southernmost bridge. But some of them are a little bit older, but some of them are very well upkept, and some will be updated.
Because a lot of these communities will either do a video talking on camera about it, or that will drive you through it and talk about it as we're driving you through it. We'll have links for those down below. I know we got one for Venice Gardens on the channel, and I'm pretty sure we have one for Ventura Village.
Rapallo and South Venice.
And Rapallo and South
Chestnut
Venice
Creek.
and Chestnut Creek.
Yes.
So all those, I'll put the links for those in the description down below for you guys.
If you want someone who's local and knowledgeable of the area and can give you a full scoop of the neighborhoods and different cities and towns, you can contact us. Our information will be in the description box below.
If you have any other questions on the Venice area or any of the cities around, leave a comment. We'll get to it in a future video. Hit the like button, subscribe, turn on all notifications, hit all those buttons, and
Live breezy.